I'm not sure if... Good morning, everybody. Just getting started over here. My signal's a little slow here. Trying to get this thing to work. Okay. Okay, I think we finally pulled it together. Got the signal. Good morning, Deborah and Elaine. Post to social media. But more of a challenge than I anticipate getting this thing on. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Hi. Finally got it all together. Yes, I see we are live. It took a little while to get that signal working. I can never understand why Facebook is more responsive some days than others. In any event, good morning to you, Robert, and Hannah, and Andy, and Mickey. And on YouTube, good morning to Elaine and Deborah. Our shul is actually, just to give you a little intro, our shul is pretty much ready for, well, it's getting ready for Shavuos. Just to give you a quick glimpse of what's going on over here. You see the tables and chairs. We've set it up with just 40 seats in our shul. Getting ready for the holiday, for the Untiv of Shavuos. Social distancing. And it's a new reality. Yeah, it's a new reality. It's the new thing. Welcome to Tal Shouter. Nice to see you with us. I'm going to start off right away. I'm sorry it's a little later than we should be. But I was having trouble with the signal this morning. So here we are. It's the morning before Shavuos. Very special day. Let's get straight into it because today what we're going to be learning about is everything else that we need to know about Shavuos. The Hayom Yom today is the 5th of Sivan, Erev Shavuos. It's the 49th day of the Omer. On the eve of Shavuos of the year 1797, the Alter Rebbe taught, sanctify them today, tomorrow, and they shall cleanse their garments. That's the verse what the Torah tells us in Exodus, sanctify them today and tomorrow, and they shall cleanse their garments. This is before the Torah was given. What this means, explained the Alter Rebbe, sanctify them today and tomorrow is done from above, but they shall cleanse their garments. One must do himself. This was the entire teaching. Now, we can have a better grip on what this means based on those of us that have studied Tanya together. Because garments means garments of our soul, TSA, thought, speech, and action. The grandson of the Alter Rebbe, the third Rebbe, elaborated, sanctified them was said by God to Moses, the extension of Moses in every generation. And they are able to sanctify the today and tomorrow. So God, through Moses, or the Moses of the generation, is able to bless us, to sanctify us in the today and the tomorrow. But for this is needed, and they shall cleanse their garments. We've got to set the ball into motion. The garments of thought, speech, and deed. This must be done by each person on his own. When we make the effort of sanctifying our own thought, speech, and action, then what happens is, when we're mindful of our thought, speech, and action, then what happens is that we then draw upon ourselves the blessing of sanctifying today and tomorrow. Now, I'm not exactly sure. I've never really understood what sanctifying today and tomorrow really means in this context. It's obviously not for us to understand. I guess you can interpret it to mean you'll be elevated, you'll be uplifted, you'll be sublimated, something. But what we know, what we can do, is the sanctification of our thought, speech, and action. When we do that, that's the proper preparation for Shavuos, to be able to receive the Torah anew for the 3,333rd time. And what we need to do to prepare for Shavuos is by cleansing our garments, our thought, speech, and action. What a beautiful way to go into Yontif. Being mindful of what you think, what you say, and what you do, making sure that they are expressive of our godly soul and not, God forbid, expressive of our animal soul. That's basically the spiritual preparation. I don't see Harvey yet with us, but I do want to say that today's Torah study was lovingly dedicated by Stacy and Andrew Thor, in loving memory of Stacy's father, Richard Keller, on the occasion of his yahrzeit today. We'll make a memorial for him, Stacy, at the very end of the service, at the very end of the class. If you could give me, please, his Hebrew name and his father's Hebrew name, that would be very helpful. And also, today's Torah study was dedicated by Harvey Barnett on the 64th anniversary of his bar mitzvah on the festival of Shavuos. So that's two very special occasions, the yahrzeit of Stacy's father and the bar mitzvah of Harvey, all taking place today. We are elevating the soul of Stacy's father and celebrating the bar mitzvah of Harvey Barnett. Harvey, would like to have you read Torah on Shavuos, God willing, next time you're around here. And we thank you for elevating the souls and honoring your own bar mitzvah with today's Torah study. You can make a dedication of Torah study at jewishgardens.com/donate. That's jewishgardens.com/donate, or by just calling the office at 561-624-2223. Good morning, Terry's Y. Good morning, Marty. Good morning, Adrian. Alan Pierce with us. How lovely. Admire. Michelle Noga and Helen and Warren. That's great to see you all. And on Ron and Stephanie Marmer. Ron Collins and Stephanie Marmer from IBIS. Good. Nice to see everybody. Let's get straight into the festival of Shavuos. We did the first part yesterday. If you missed it, you can find the class at youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. It's all about Shavuos part 1. And now we're going to do all about Shavuos part 2. Hopefully we're going to finish it. It's everything we need to know about Shavuos. It's the festival that's starting tonight. It goes for 48 hours from Thursday night all the way through to Saturday night. It is the most beautiful Yontif, which celebrates the receiving of the Torah when God shows us as a people. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Giovanni Shimonovitz. Giovanni, so good to see you. Been too long since we studied together last. I'm grateful to have you with us. Hopefully you'll stick around. So, what we're celebrating in Shavuos is the receiving of the Torah. Remember, the name Shavuos means weeks. And as we mentioned yesterday, you got to count 7 weeks from the second day of Pesach. That's how you find the date of the Yontif. For this reason, you cannot start the Yontif early. You got to wait until nightfall tonight before you start the Yontif early. Whilst every other Jewish holiday, you can start davening, you can light the candles early. On Shavuos, you cannot do that because the biblical mitzvah is to count 7 full weeks. And today is the 49th day of the Omer, which means tonight is going to be 50. Tonight is going to be the time to celebrate Shavuos, but you cannot do that if it's still the 49th day. Let's take a look. You got to wait until dark. It is customary in many communities to light candles and bring in Yontif up to 1.25 hours before sunset to increase the time span of Yom Tov's holiness. We spoke about this yesterday. In these communities, it is also customary to pray the evening service before sunset. This is because women accept Yom Tov through candle lighting, but men accept it through prayer. Thus, the men bring in Yom Tov early by praying before sunset, and we'll typically do that here at Chabad on a Shabbos, especially in the summertime. Shabbos comes in like 7 o'clock. We'll always work out the earliest time to accept the Shabbos. Shabbos might come in 8 o'clock, but we're davening at 6 or 6:15, which is the earliest possible time, so that we can have some sort of a semblance of a normal meal with our kids on a Friday night. So we'll always try to accept the Shabbos in as constant a time as possible, never going earlier than that 1.25 hours, which is the earliest time that you can accept the Shabbos. Legally, it's called Plaga Mincha, which means half of the Mincha, half of the afternoon. It's 1.25 hours, variable hours, before sunset. However, on Shavuos, we must wait until nightfall to begin the evening service. This is because Shavuos cannot begin until 7 weeks, 49 days, of the Omer count are complete. And the last day of the Omer is not complete until night falls. There's a nice story of Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, the holy Ruzhin, when he was playing outdoors late one Friday afternoon with his brother when he was his little boy. His older brother urged him to hurry up. It's nearly Shabbos. Rabbi Yisrael looked up to the sky and he confirmed that it was indeed nearly Shabbos. His older brother asked him, "How did you know it's nearly Shabbos? Why? Well, you just looked up at the sky. What did you see?" The child replied, "Can't you see the profound change that overcomes the skies when Shabbos arrives?" A beautiful thought there. Oh, I see that Harvey Barnett just joined us. Harvey, Mazel Tov on the occasion of your bar mitzvah. This Shavuos, the 64th anniversary, in whose honor you've dedicated today's Torah study, this week of Torah study. Harvey, thank you very, very much for your support and for associating your special day with our community. L'chaim to you, my friend. L'chaim. Wish we could celebrate in person, but this is pretty good. So the order of prayers of Shavuos you'll find in the prayer book. Here it is. Here's the prayer book. Very, very important to buy your own prayer book. If you don't have one yet, you can please buy one at the office of the shul by calling the office 561-624-2223. You can also buy it online when you reserve the RSVP form to come to shul this Yontif. We are reopening our shul. Hopefully you've all seen that. But you have to make a reservation to make sure that there's enough seats for you. There's only 40 people allowed into the shul this Yontif by doctor's orders. So we really hope that you have a prayer book. If you don't have a prayer book, I just want to show you where you can download, where you can at least find an online prayer book. It's I'm going to post it in the comment section over here for YouTube and on Facebook. At least you can follow along with us here today. I just posted it to YouTube, and I'm doing the same thing to Facebook. Okay, so if you go to the prayer book to page 161, you'll find the evening service for tonight. We're going to blitz through this just to get an understanding on what we want Shavuos. The evening service begins in 161 and it goes through page 166 like a regular Shabbat or festival. But on 166, we're going to flip over to the Special Amida as indicated just before the Amida, the one for the special holidays, and that's on page 331. It's the silent Amida for festivals. The central theme of this prayer is our gratitude to God for choosing the Jewish people from amongst all the nations and for giving us the festival of Shavuos, on which we receive the Torah. That's the theme of the holiday. So it's not a prayer that you would say on a regular Yontif. This is a special prayer, thanking God for choosing us as His chosen people. We also ask God to grant us blessing of life, joy, and merriment on this holy day. When we say, Ata bechartanu mikol ha'amim, you have selected us from amongst all the nations, it is appropriate to focus on the time that we were chosen, which was when He gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai. This prayer resonates with all the Jewish holidays, but especially, we actually say that prayer on all the Jewish holidays, the three major ones, but at least on Shavuos, that is certainly most appropriate. The central blessing ends with the beautiful words, Mekadesh Yisrael v'yazmanim, who sanctifies Israel and the times. Who sanctifies Israel and the times. On Shabbos, the central blessing just ends, Mekadesh HaShabbos, who sanctifies the Shabbos. But on the Yontif, who sanctifies Israel and the times. God alone sanctifies Shabbos because it occurs weekly without any human contribution. Shabbos happens whether you show up or not. When the sun sets on Friday, the holiness of Shabbos spontaneously descends. But the Jewish people sanctify Yom Tov. Why? Because it is determined by the day of the month rather than by the day of the week. Obviously, the day of the month is determined by us. It is not by default. Let me explain. In ancient Israel, the high Jewish court would declare the opening of a new month on the basis of testimony from witnesses who saw the new moon. That's how it worked. You couldn't just schedule a wedding for the 16th of next month because you never knew if the third Monday of the month was the 16th or the 14th or the 15th. It depended on when the new moon was sighted. Does this month have 29 days, have 30 days or 31 days? Really, that's what was fluctuating. You needed two witnesses to testify to that. In fact, the Talmud tells us that when the angels once approached God and they said, "No, when's Rosh Chodesh? When is the new month?" You think God would know this, right? God responds to the angels and he says, "I don't know. Let you and I go down to the earthly court and find out what they've decided." God has given the Torah into our domain, and not to change the Torah, but to work out when and how to apply it. So when the court says Rosh Chodesh is on Monday, or the new month that begins on Tuesday, that's binding. God has given us the mandate. So that's why the Shabbos is self-sanctified by God. But the Yom Tov is not self-sanctified because it doesn't go by the days of the week. It goes by the days of the month, which is in our jurisdiction. Since the new month depends on the Jewish court, we thank God for sanctifying us, the Jewish people, which empowers us to sanctify the days of the month and dictate in turn the date of the holiday. On a spiritual level, this means that Shabbos is a gift that we receive from above. But Yom Tov is a gift that we give to God from below. It comes from within and is thus extra precious. So that's why we say at the end of the blessing on page 331, who sanctifies Israel and her times. Or the times. So God sanctifies the times that we choose. Nice idea over there. Good morning, Lucy and Shmaya Futafas, cousin. Great. Stacy, my dad's Hebrew name is Reuven. Unfortunately, I do not know his father's Hebrew name, but his English name was Howard. Okay, good. So today's Torah study is to elevate the soul of Reuven ben Howard. We'll make a memorial at the end, Stacy, all right? Stay tuned. So we're carrying on. The evening meal, very important, is to make Kiddush on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. So how does this work? I'm curious to know. I've never really been to people's houses on Friday nights. I'm curious to know, do you make Kiddush at home? In your home, you may not be keeping Shabbos 100%, but you make Kiddush. I hope that you do. It's a very, very beautiful experience. Certainly the highlight of my home, of my week. And I hope that you do it. Let's talk about Kiddush and how we can make it more meaningful. Dan, good morning. Nice to see you. So Kiddush, one of the special moments. Dan, you should make Kiddush at home. I hope you do. We all should make Kiddush at home. Here's how it works. One of the special Shabbat moments that I enjoy each week is when we sing the Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem Alachei. It's most beautiful. Just a tune just calms me, puts me in a state of peace. We welcome the Shabbat angels. It's so beautiful. Every Friday night we do this. The kids around the table, the table fit for a king. The house is clean. The kids are well dressed. Everybody's calm. There's no TV. There's no email. There's no phones. It's beautiful. It's very present time of the week. And I really hope that you can bring this blessing into your home if you don't already have it. We sing Shalom Aleichem. We welcome the Shabbat angels. We sing Eshes Chayil, which is the woman of valor. We sing it to our wives, praising them for being our wives and for being who they are. To greet the angels and to honor the Jewish woman. However, these melodies are unique to Shabbos, and because it's Yom Tov, we don't sing those melodies on Yom Tov tonight. Why? Because unlike unlike the Shabbos Kiddush, which is a biblical obligation, Kiddush and Yom Tov is not biblical. It's rabbinical. It's a rabbinical obligation. Hi, Stu. Welcome to our Torah study session today. So Kiddush on Friday night is biblical. You're supposed to sanctify the Shabbat at its beginning and its end. We do that by using the most special drink that we can get our hands on, which is wine. It's the most expensive drink. But in Yantiv, it's only a rabbinical obligation to make Kiddush. Nevertheless, all the laws that apply to Kiddush and Shabbos also apply to Kiddush and Yantiv. How do you make Kiddush? Let's talk about this. The core of the Kiddush mandate is a verbal proclamation about the sanctity of the day. That's it. That's basically what you're doing. Our sages ordained that this be recited over a cup of wine to make it more important. In many cultures, wine is an important drink and provides an atmosphere of prominence, and Judaism uses wine to mark numerous momentous occasions. Good idea. We like that. If one cannot drink wine, then grape juice can be used as a substitute. So it's basically a verbal affirmation of the sanctity of the day. You're separating the mundane of the week to the holiness of the day. The most beautiful therapy is making Kiddush on Friday night. The Kiddush cup should hold at least 3 fluid ounces. The custom is to use a fancy goblet, which is designated for the mitzvah. You're beautifying the mitzvah. Everything we do for a mitzvah should be beautiful. If you're making Kiddush, you shouldn't use a plastic throwaway cup. I mean, you can. But if you're doing something for God, why don't you use a silver goblet? For your Hanukkah candles, don't just use a throwaway tin. Use something precious and valuable to show that you value the mitzvah. When you build yourself a home, you make it beautiful. So you do the same thing for the home that you built for God. The shul should also be beautiful, should be magnificent. Right? We bought our kids. Actually, my parents-in-law bought our kids these beautiful silver goblets. It makes it so special. It makes it such a beautiful experience. The 2 challahs discussed below should be present at the table under a cover. We'll talk about in a moment why the 2 challahs and why they're under a cover during the Kiddush. We fill the cup with kosher wine or grape juice, and we pour a bit more so that it overflows, because a cup over which we recite a blessing should overflow. My cup runneth over. It's not that the rabbis can't aim. It's that my cup should overflow. My cup runneth over with blessing. As below, so above. When we overflow our cup, so too God overflows our blessing. Everybody would appreciate a bit of an overflow. In your bank account, you could use a bit of an overflow, right? Stand up and take the cup in your right, your dominant hand. If you're left-handed, it goes in your left. Glance at the candles before Kiddush and take in the Yantiv light as you start saying the Kiddush. We begin with the blessing of Borei Pri Hagafen. Where is this Kiddush blessing? Kiddush blessing, hold on. It's in the prayer book. It's here somewhere. Here it is. You'll find the blessing for Kiddush tonight on page 329. Page 329 in the middle of the page, you'll see on weeknight you begin with the blessing Borei Pri Hagafen. And then you recite the blessing over the festival of Yantiv. On Friday night, you would start with Yom HaShishi Vayechulu Hashamayim, which is the preamble for Friday night. So again, we said you glance at the wine in the cup. So first of all, you glance at the candles, and then you start making the Kiddush blessing. But you glance at the wine in the cup when you say the wine blessing, to associate the blessing that you're about to make with what you're looking at. You then recite the blessing for Yantiv, which is thanking God for having chosen us, for having elevated us from all nations, and sanctifying us with His mitzvahs and giving us this holy day. This day that He chose us to give us the Torah, a special day because You've chosen us from all the nations, holy times, with joy and with gladness. Thank you, God, who has sanctified Israel and the times, right? We then conclude with the blessing of Shehechiyanu, which is thanking God for this perpetuous occasion. If the ladies have already made the blessing of Shehechiyanu on the candles, then they don't make it again. And then you drink at least 50% of the cup, 1.5 fluid ounces of the cup. If there are other family members or guests that are joining you for your meal, then you should recite the Kiddush aloud, and everyone should fulfill, anyone who wishes to fulfill their Kiddush obligation through your recitation can answer Amen. Obviously, if they want to make their own Kiddush, why not? The more the merrier. After Kiddush, it's customary for all present to have a sip of the wine. During the Kiddush wording, we describe Yantiv as Mikra Kodesh, as a holy happening. It's called holy, unlike Shabbos, which is inherently holy. Shabbos is more holy than Yantiv. Shabbos is transcendent and cannot lower itself into the world, but Yom Tov is not as transcendent. Yom Tov can fall on an ordinary weekday like tonight. Thus, in Yom Tov, we can call or summon holiness down to the world and turn a regular weekday into a holy day. But Shabbos is so transcendent that it doesn't touch the regular weekdays. Shabbos obviously never falls out on a weekday because it's transcendent. In the Kiddush, we say, "B'kiddashanu b'mitzvosav," He sanctifies us with His commandments. An alternative translation is of Kiddushanu. We've spoken about this in our meditation and prayer classes. Another translation of Kiddushanu is who has married us with his commandments. So it's not just that God has sanctified us with his commandments, but he's actually married us with his commandments. As we say these words, we should reflect on the fact that God betrothed the Jewish people on Mount Sinai on this day. It's a very special realization. When you realize that God is we're betrothed to God. When is the wedding going to take place? Any ideas? The wedding will take place. You know, what's the wedding? The wedding is Hirosho. The wedding is when we're intimate with our spouse. The wedding is when we're revealed to our spouse. That is the coming of Mashiach. When Mashiach comes, that's when the veil is lifted. The veil of Golus, of Exodus. Sorry, the veil of exile is lifted. And now, in the words of Isaiah, the glory of God will be revealed, and all fleshly eye will see that the word of God is spoken. We will see the godliness within the tree, within your house, within your dining room table. That's intimacy. That's marriage. Right now we're betrothed to God. The wedding ring is, the engagement ring is Torah. If you throw away the wedding ring, the engagement ring, doesn't look good for the marriage. That's why we're celebrating Shavuos, the receiving of the Torah. It's the ring. But we can't wait for the wedding. We want Mashiach now. It's enough already. That will be the end of suffering, the end of disease, the end of epidemics, pandemics, the end of suffering, of loneliness, of competition, of war, of any suffering. So that's happening soon, God willing, very, very soon, imminently. Okay, let's talk about the bread. So we spoke about the Kiddush. Any questions so far? Please do share your thoughts with me. Please do share your thoughts with me. We'd love to hear your comments or questions on Facebook and YouTube here. We're going to carry on now to the bread. We spoke about the wine. Let's talk about the bread on the table. Why do we have two breads on the table? Jewish law states that Kiddush is not valid unless it is immediately followed by a meal. You know, you can do this, guys. You can do Kiddush at home. I don't know if you already do it or not at home. I hope that you do. But if you don't, then you can do it. Just Friday night, tonight, stop what you're doing at sundown, light the candles, give tzedakah like we spoke yesterday, you light the candles, then you move on to Kiddush. You put a white tablecloth on the table, 2 loaves of challah. It's so beautiful, the most beautiful present time with your wife, with your husband, with your children, with your grandchildren. It's amazing. I wouldn't give this away for any money in the world. It is my most precious time. Ask any of my kids. What is the most precious time of the whole week? I have no doubt that they'll tell you this. Jewish law states that Kiddush is not valid unless immediately followed by a meal. There's an important message here. Kiddush is a spiritual endeavor. Kiddush means to sanctify. The meal is a physical endeavor, right? But we need to make sure that it influences our regular life. You don't want to leave your spiritual parts of your life as segregated, as separate from real life. You know, I'm religious when I'm in shul. When I'm outside, I'm an animal. No, you want a connection. You want to be inspired in shul to be able to be a mensch and be conscious outside, right? When you're in the street. That's the point of making adjacent the Kiddush with the meal. We need to make sure that it influences our regular life, the way we eat and so forth. Sanctity and transcendence are not valuable if they don't inform and influence regular living. Here's a quote from the Rebbe on this topic. The Torah's command that Shabbos and holidays must be a time of pleasure for the Jewish people does not mean that only the soul should derive spiritual pleasure from Shabbos or the holidays. The body must also derive pleasure from Shabbos or the holidays. Moreover, the primary objective of the mitzvah of pleasure is specifically to refine the body. Because the body naturally derives pleasure from eating and drinking, the Torah says that the obligation is to take pleasure on the Shabbos through eating. It is only in this way that the pleasure of Shabbos can truly permeate and refine the body. Our body really understands the pleasure of Shabbos when you eat that amazing meal on Friday night and Shabbos day. Fasting in order to repent and so forth can bring pleasure to the soul, but it doesn't have much of an impact on the pleasure of the body. Even if someone is refined to the point that fasting does not cause bodily suffering and even provides the body with satisfaction of bringing pleasure to the soul, nevertheless, this is not a natural pleasure for the body. Rather, is a result of the soul forcing the body to deny its basic nature, even if it is a holy and refined body. The purpose is to create for God a dwelling place in this world, to make holy this physical world. When we take Kiddush, which is holy, and speaks to our soul, but then we connect and make it adjacent to our body's pleasure by eating and drinking, by infusing the holiness down into our regular experience, that is something which is meaningful and purposeful to draw holiness into our physical existence, our physical reality. Okay? A very beautiful meditation right there. That's why we do so many physical mitzvahs, by the way. You know, I know that the founder of Christianity had a problem with the money changers in the temple. It was like, this is a holy place. Why are we changing money here? You know, he didn't like that. But it ties in perfectly, because the purpose of money is not evil. Money is neutral, and it's supposed to be used for a holy purpose. The money changers in the temple were redeeming money sanctified, you know, the various tithing and gifts to the temple that were brought from where people lived, and they were being exchanged for sacrifices and for foods that were being eaten in the temple. So but they were being sanctified by having money changing in the temple. When you give tzedakah before lighting candles or before davening, what you're doing is you're sanctifying the money. It's not that the money is evil and it's like somehow the antithesis of holiness. On the contrary, when you take money and you use it for tzedakah, you use it for a mitzvah, you're sanctifying the money. When you're eating food, you know, other religions, they say, oh, you got to be fasting all the time. Judaism says, no, eat, drink, and be merry, because we're supposed to make our body part and parcel of serving God. And you'll remember in the Shema, in the meditation and prayer class that we teach here, it says, you shall love God, your God, b'chol levavecha, with all of your hearts, plural. Levavecha, with both your hearts. What does that mean? Your godly soul's heart and your animal soul's heart. It's not enough to serve God with your godly soul. You also want to serve God with your animal soul. That's the point of it all. And that's why we make adjacent the Kiddush to the eating of the meal. Now, the meal begins with 2 loaves of bread. What's up with the 2 loaves of bread? Why do we have 2 challahs on the table? Is one not enough? What's going on in here? So the loaves of bread remind us of the manna that the Jewish people ate on the way coming out of Egypt. For 40 years we were in the desert. This was our training to become the chosen people. I love that the meditation of the manna teaches us to be wholly reliant upon God. Don't believe in your boss. Don't believe in your stocks. Don't believe in your real estate. Everything comes from God. For 40 years we were in the desert. We would go to sleep at night penniless, without anything, no prospect of food for tomorrow in the desert, and God would provide all of our needs the next morning. So every day they would wake up, they would have the manna for that day, only enough food for one day. But on Fridays they would get a double portion, because Shabbos you wouldn't go out to the field. So because when the Jewish people in the desert, manna rained down from heaven each day. However, on Fridays and before Yontiv, a double portion of manna fell for that day and for the next. Each Shabbos and Yontiv, we commemorate the miracle of the manna, of our trust in God, the gates of trust. I always say it's fundamental. This is the fulcrum of our faith. Each Shabbos and Yontiv, we commemorate the miracle of the manna, of God providing for us while we were in the desert, by serving 2 loaves of bread, corresponding to the double portion of the manna that fell out in those days. So when you look at the 2 portions of challah on your table, Friday night and Shabbos day on Yontiv, you're remembering the trust, the gates of trust, that we have no one else to rely on but in God himself, itself, that's it, herself, that's it. Think good and it will be good. That's what happens when you look at those challahs. It's Shabbos, I can't work today. Am I losing clients? Am I losing business? I couldn't care less, because right now my allegiance is only to God. My blessing only comes from God. No doctors, no lawyers, no businesses. Only God provides for my needs. And that is manifest. That meditation is manifest in the 2 loaves of bread that we have on the table on Shabbos and Yontif. Tremendous meditation. This is also one of the reasons, by the way, there's some Sephardic Jews, they actually read the portion of the manna every single day to be able to meditate on this idea. This is also one of the reasons for the custom of covering the challah during Kiddush. When the manna was served to the Jews, it came, nicely packaged. There was a layer of dew below and a layer of dew above, nice and fresh, right? The manna would fall between the 2 layers of dew. When we cover the challah and we have a nice clean tablecloth beneath, you're having the 2 layers, one above and one below. We're reminded of the caring way in which God delivered the manna to us, right? Remembering the manna reminds us that just as God provided for our ancestors in the desert, so does he provide for us now. We don't provide for ourselves through our own efforts. God provides us through our efforts. Remember the gates of trust. Somebody called me the other day from Toronto and he said, Rabbi, I just finished I'm in the middle of the second round of reviewing the Gates of Trust classes that we teach over here. You'll find them all at jewishgardens.com/trust. And this is mind-blowing. It changes your perception of reality. And it serves as a lightning rod to bring the blessings upon you. If you can learn the lesson of the two challahs and live your life with that Weltanschauung, with that perception of reality, that nothing has any power over me, only God. I have no fear. I have no anxiety. I'm always at peace and tranquility. In Shabbos mode, basically, as I know that God provides for my needs. Exclusively. God exclusively is the provider of my needs. So we don't provide for ourselves through our own effort. God provides for us God provides for us through our efforts. Right? He wants us to make it look like it came from somewhere else. But that's why we make our efforts, not because we trust in our efforts. We make our efforts only because that's the vehicle that God wants the blessing to go through. When we abstain on Shabbos and Yom Tov, when we abstain from work and appear to lose money, it is important to remember that our income comes only from God. There's another reason for covering the Challah during Kiddush. This is very interesting. According to Jewish law, when we have bread and wine on our table, we should recite the blessing over bread before the blessing over the wine. Why? Because the bread is more dominant of a food than the wine. It's more sustaining. But on Shabbos, because of the tradition to recite Kiddush before eating bread, we disregard the priority usually given to bread, and we recite the blessing over wine ahead of the blessing over the bread. We therefore need to cover the Challah to save it from its shame, the demotion of its status. We don't want to hurt the feelings of the Challah. Can you imagine what's going on over here? We have an inanimate, whatever, it's not inanimate, but it's not human. Doesn't really have emotions. We don't want to embarrass the Challah. So here we are, we're religious. We're so careful not to hurt the feelings of the Challah. But what about the feelings of your neighbor? What about the feelings of the guy that is on the other side of your political aisle? The guy that says you should have a mask or you shouldn't have a mask, or Trump this or Trump that, right? Are you careful and mindful not to hurt his or her feelings? That's the message of the Challah. We're careful not to hurt the feelings of the Challah. How much more so should we be careful with your brother, your sister, your wife, your husband, your children, your parents? Obviously, Challah doesn't have feelings, but our sages wanted to impart a lesson. If inanimate bread must be treated with such consideration, how much more so must we be on guard not to embarrass or hurt a human being? Now, how do we do the meal? Before the Kiddush, we place 2 whole loaves of challah on the table. They should be whole rolls, whole, no biting, no missing pieces, no broken pieces. Whole rolls. You can use matzah, by the way. You can use whole matzahs or even pita breads, but it's got to be whole. Beautiful custom is to bake the challah before Shabbos and to fill the home with the aroma of the bread. You'll probably remember as I'm talking right now, the aroma of your bubby's house before Shabbos. You can do that in your own home right now. You can infuse that beauty, that blessing, those smells, those sights and sounds of Shabbos and of holiness in your own home as well. You cover the challah loaves until after the Kiddush is recited. Beautiful challah covers are available at Judaica stores and online for reasonable prices, but a cloth or napkin does the trick as well. We then unveil the challah loaves only after the Kiddush, demonstrating the day, as was the entire meal, are in honor of the Yom Tov, whose presence and holiness you just acknowledged by the Kiddush. After the Kiddush, we ritually wash our hands as you would wash for bread. And you say the blessing al natilas yadayim. We went through this in a previous class. The blessing of al natilas yadayim. We then lightly score the top of the challah loaves with a knife. We just scratch a little scratch on top of the challah before reciting the blessing of the hamotzi. We then recite the blessing of hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We slice the loaf that you scratched, dip the piece of bread in salt, and enjoy. We spoke about some of these details earlier. After you take a piece of bread for yourself, you slice pieces of challah for all present. It is not necessary to eat both challah loaves. If only one is consumed, you can put the second one away for the next meal. One of the interesting reasons that we scratch the challah is because we've got 10 fingers. We put the 10 fingers on the challah. There's also 10 words in the blessing of hamotzi. And you got the 2 challahs represented, the challahs that rise and expand like the letter hey, which rises and expands. So you get 2 hays, 1 yud, which is 10 fingers, 2 hays, which is the rising challah. And when you add the scratch, it's a vav, which spells the name of God, the yud and the hay, and the vav and the hay, which brings the name of God, the ineffable name of God we're not allowed to pronounce, bringing sanctity and holiness and mindfulness to what we're doing right here. Okay, the meal. As mentioned earlier, the meal in Yantav should be more lavish than the meals on Shabbos. Tasty food brings joy, which helps us fulfill the added requirement on Yantav to be joyful. You have to be joyous on Yantav. It's a mitzvah to be joyous. It's called Zman Simchaseinu, the time of our joy. The Samachta b'chagecha, and you'll be joyous on the festival. In many Jewish homes, many of the traditional dishes served on Shabbos are also served on Yantav. However, halachically, the Yom Tov meal can be comprised of any foods that you enjoy. You don't have to have gefilte fish or cholent. Any foods that you enjoy. Meat and wine, however, are obligatory on Yom Tov. This is because our sages deem these foods, when consumed in moderation, as especially conducive to facilitating joy. Okay. After the meal, we recite the grace after meals. You'll find that on page 88 through 95 in the prayer book. Now, there's some very interesting, unique customs that we celebrate on Shavuos. For example, we stay up all night studying Torah tonight. That's going to be fun. And also, we have certain kinds of foods that we eat on this day. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at why we stay up all night. It's a tradition to remain up until dawn on this day and study the Torah. Let's see when that ends. Hold on a second. I'm checking my Jewish calendar here. So when is dawn tomorrow morning? Let's see. Loading. Dawn is 5:04 a.m. So it's customary to stay up all night until 5:04 a.m. Okay. What do? Our sages describe the day that we receive the Torah as a betrothal ceremony. And we stay up, obviously, studying Torah, if I didn't say that clearly. Our sages describe the day that we receive the Torah as a betrothal ceremony between God and ourselves. In the hours leading up to her wedding, the bride's entourage beautify and adorn her so she will look her best for the groom when she finally sees him. Similarly, we spend hours before we will once again be betrothed to God, adorning and beautifying ourselves spiritually by studying the Torah. Another reason is because the night before the Jewish people received the Torah in Mount Sinai in the year 2448 since creation, 3,332 years ago, we were doing something else the night before we went to sleep. They slept very deeply. When God arrived to give them the Torah, they were still asleep. Many years later, God conveyed his displeasure through the prophet Isaiah. Why did I arrive and there was no man? I called and there was no response. Quote from Isaiah. To rectify this omission, we remain awake in this night and we study Torah. So we're kind of making a tikkun, a repair for what was done then. Many have the custom of reciting a book called Tikkun Leil Shavuos, the fixing, the repairing of the night of Shavuos. It's a very interesting book. I should really post it to the WhatsApp group, to the Men's Millionaires group, which is the book. I should really post that. I want to try to remember that. It's a book which you're supposed to recite all night tonight. And what it does is it takes the first and last sections of each and every section in the Torah. Goes through the entire Tanakh, the written Torah, and the oral Torah, and the 613 commandments, and part of the Zohar of the secret Torah. So it's the written Torah, the oral Torah, the mitzvahs, and the secret Torah, the Kabbalah. You go through everything that we received at Mount Sinai, and we do the first and end of each section. According to the first reason for staying awake on this night, tikkun may be understood as a cognate of the Aramaic word tikkuna, which means adornment. But according to the second reason for staying awake in this night, tikkun may be understood as making a repair, a rectification. We're fixing what we messed up the first time when we were sleeping. The tikkun comprises the first 3 and last 3 verses of each chapter in the written Torah. Also, the first and last passage of each tractate in the Talmud. It includes a list of the 613 mitzvahs, tracts from the Holy Book of Zohar. It includes Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, which some attribute to have been written by Adam himself. In addition, the first and last In addition to the first and last 3 chapters of each biblical book, the Tikkun also contains entire chapters of episodes with unique significance, such as the narrative of creation, the exodus of Egypt, the splitting of the sea, and the giving of the Torah. When you read this all night, let me tell you, keeps you busy till dawn. But when you do that, it basically covers the entire Torah and a very appropriate preparation for the receiving of the Torah. Studying this book allows us to scan the entire corpus of Torah, the written Torah, the oral Torah, the commandments, and the concealed dimension of Torah, the Kabbalah. Tikkun also includes the book of Ruth, which I mentioned in a class recently. It was on Sunday night. You can find that class at facebook.com/myjli/live. I wonder if we should move that class also to our YouTube page, just for the benefit of our community. Maybe we'll do that. Many have accustomed to chant the book of Ruth in the synagogue on the first morning of Shavuos before the reading of the 10 Commandments from the Torah. We don't do that in Chabad. It's not a Chabad custom to do that. We read the book of Ruth during the nighttime. Okay? In other communities, including Chabad, the book of Ruth is read individually as part of the Tikkun on the first night of Shavuos. The book of Ruth, and I explained this in my class on Sunday night, called it was called the Convert and the Creed. The authenticity of the oral Torah. It was all about the connection between the book of Ruth and Shavuos. The book of Ruth tells the story of Ruth, the ancestress of King David. She was the great-grandmother, who was a Moabite princess, and she sacrificed a life of luxury to live as a poor and simple convert to Judaism. She suffered poverty and discrimination at first, but her piety was noticed by the prominent Jewish leader Boaz, who eventually married her. She merited to give birth to the ancestor of King David as his great-grandmother. She actually lived to see him. Shavuos is the birthday and the passing of King David, and thus it's appropriate to read about his pious ancestress. The deeper meaning of that story is what I explained in that 30-minute class, the Convert and the Creed. The book of Ruth describes the harvest during which Boaz noticed Ruth's piety in great detail. It is appropriate to read this book in Shavuos, which is also called the Festival of the Harvest. For the farmers amongst us, it's this time that we're supposed to if you were farmers, you would know that now's the time to harvest, apparently. Not that I know. Okay, Andy, I'm just posting the link to you. I just posted to you on Facebook, Andy, the link to that class. It's called The Convert and the Creed. The name of the class. Okay. Ruth was the quintessential convert. She embraced Judaism with all her heart, and she made great sacrifice to do so. Her story teaches us that those who sacrifice greatly to become a Jew also contribute to Judaism in unique ways. It is appropriate to read this book on Shavuos when the Jewish people converted en masse to Judaism. So Ruth was the first convert officially. Well, not the first, but she was a major convert and a very controversial convert because the Torah prohibits the nation of Moab to convert to Judaism. So it's a fascinating discussion, which is what I covered in that class, The Convert and the Creed, at the link I just posted, to be able to properly understand the incredible background of King David and his very controversial background. Let's take a look at some of the questions here coming in. Adam is asking from Atlanta, how does saying Kiddush during the Ma'ariv service compare to the Kiddush said at Friday night dinner? It's not much different. It's got the same essential affirmation, Adam. So not much different. The difference is that you're doing it over a glass of wine. That's the difference. But it's both are necessary. One is in the context of prayer, and the other one is in the context of the meal, as I described, making Kiddush adjacent to the food. Questions coming in. Rabbi, dawn tomorrow is 6:02 a.m. What? Mickey, tomorrow dawn is at 6:02. I don't think so. I don't think so, Mick. I think you might make a mistake. Dawn is at 5:04 a.m. Sunrise is at 6:28. Yep, that's according to my Chabad.org. If you go to jewishgardens.com/calendar, you'll see it there. Tell me if you think if you think differently. The Facebook link did not work, says Andy. The resource you okay. Anyways, I hope that the YouTube link. Mickey's right in the times. I don't know, Mick. This is what Chabad.org is telling me. So, Chabad.org is telling me 5:04 as dawn. Maybe, I don't know what your source is. Like, I'm not sure. Take a look at georgegardens.com/calendar. I don't know. Okay, so next up, let's go a little further, just covering a few more issues on about the holiday. We do say Hallel in our prayers. Okay, there's a special prayer called Akadamus. Akadamus is actually published in the Siddur. It's a very, very beautiful prayer. I just want to show you. I always feel bad that we don't say it. It's not our custom, but we kind of say it quietly. Okay, let me see where it is. It's at the back of this. It's at the back of the Siddur, the blue Siddur, and you'll find it here. You'll find it on page 517. Akdamus milin v'sharayus shuso avlo shakilno harmonu reshuso. In some congregations, the following hymn is chanted on the first day of Shavuos before reading the Torah. Chabad custom is not to chant it. The intent of the poet is to recount the glory of the Master of the universe as manifested in the creation of the world and by the heavenly hosts. He then describes the unwavering faith of the people of Israel in the face of those who instigate them to idolatry, as expressed in their taught to them and their fervent trust in the great bliss which is in store for them, some of whose nature the poet depicts. Commentaries must be consulted for a proper understanding of this poem on page 517 in the back of the blue prayer book. But after Hallel, after the songs of praise, before the Torah reading, many communities will chant this elaborate poetic ode to God called Akadamos. It's read responsively with the leader. The leader recites 2 stanzas, and the congregation responds with the following 2 stanzas. The prayer, written in Aramaic, begins with the praise of God's greatness that transcends all of description. It goes on to describe the myriads of angels that God created and the way in which they praise God. It proclaims our allegiance to God and none other, and concludes with a description of the miraculous events that will take place at the coming of the Mashiach. Basically, it's our engagement party. It's like our engagement manifesto. Why are we marrying God? Why are we getting engaged? It's so beautiful. I love to read this stuff. And I encourage you to do the same. Very, very beautiful piece to read on Shavuos. Akadamos was written by Rabbi Meir ben Yitzchak Nehorai of Orleans, France, who lived in the 11th century. The poem has an embedded acrostic. The first 2 lines begin with the letter Aleph, the next 2 lines begin with the letter Bet. The author embedded his own name in the first letter of the final 46 lines. He also included a prayer that he be strong and courageous and grow in Torah and in good deeds. I'll tell you a legend that I heard. So a legend is like this, is that, we have the 10 lost tribes of Israel. So originally there was 12 tribes, but the 10 tribes were exiled, never to be found until the coming of the Mashiach. Who exiled them was Sancheriv, the king of Assyria. This is before the Romans, before the Greeks, before the Babylonians destroyed our first temple, came the Assyrians. The Assyrians, now this is after the Egyptians. When we were living in the land of Israel, the Assyrians they conquered the land of Israel. And they exiled the 10 tribes to the other side of the river Sambation. Sambation is like a legendary river that flows very, very strong all week long, and it rests on Shabbos, whatever that means. And therefore, a Jew can't cross it because you can't cross the river on Shabbos. Legend goes that there was a Jew that went across, and he basically, he went across, I don't remember the details of the story, to save the Jews on the other side. And as he was violating the Shabbos to do that, he left behind this poem. That's the legend. Interesting. It doesn't seem to match with this particular version that I gave you right now. But the legend is that that's the origin of the Akadama's prayer by a Jew who went over to save other Jews. He kind of left behind his last will and testament for us in this Akadamus prayer. So Mickey's saying that the dawn is listed in the app of the Chabad Siddur. Mickey, I don't know how to find that because On today it shows sunrise at 6:28, but it doesn't show me dawn. I don't know how to find that. How do you go to tomorrow's date? I don't know. I don't know how to find that in tomorrow's date. Halachic times. Oh, here it is. Dawn, Mick, come on. Dawn is 5:04 a.m. Look. 5:04 a.m. There it is. Sunrise at 6:28. Mick, I don't know what you're talking about, man, because it's over here at 5:04 a.m. I don't know. Listen, I don't like to argue with you, but anyways, let's do one more piece over here about the dairy dishes. We have dairy dishes. Why do we eat dairy on Shavuos? What's up with the dairy, right? Some of my fond memories of growing up at our youth minyan when I was back in Johannesburg was that the Rebbitzin of the youth minyan would work for months preparing this lavish, elaborate breakfast with so many different kinds of cheesecakes and everything else. Big deal to eat dairy on Shavuos. What's up with the dairy? It's customary to eat dairy on the first day of Shavuos. We learned earlier that eating meat is obligatory on Yontif, hence it is important to eat meat and dairy. Therefore, you got to make sure to be able to separate the meat and the dairy. What you do is you first eat the dairy meal and you rinse your mouth and you wash your hands well. You change the tablecloth and all the dishware before the meat meal. Many have the custom to wait an hour, we spoke about, after dairy. Wait a full hour after dairy, wait 6 hours after meat. So what you do is in the morning, like late morning after davening, you have a dairy meal. Then you wait an hour like a Kiddush, and then you wait an hour and you have lunch later. There are multiple reasons for eating dairy. Number one, there's many reasons. I'm going to give you just a couple here. When the Torah was given on Shavuos, the Jews became obligated to observe the kosher dietary laws. It came down on us like a ton of bricks, right? It was like, at Shavuos, God says, you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. No, making the meat and the milk and all the laws of kosher. The meat that they had prepared in advance had not been properly slaughtered. By the way, one of the proofs of the oral Torah, of the authenticity of the oral Torah, is that the laws of slaughter are nowhere in the written Torah. The laws of shechting, of the ritual slaughter of an animal, very intricate laws, are nowhere listed in the Torah. But what it does say in the Torah is that you shall slaughter the animal as I have commanded you, which is an explicit proof that God, when he gave the written Torah, accompanied it together with an oral Torah, the laws of slaughter. So when the meat that they had prepared in advance of the festival was no longer kosher, because it hadn't been slaughtered ritually and was suddenly not kosher. In addition, the utensils and all their dishes all required koshering because they had mixed meat and milk and treifus in the dishes. Since it was Shabbos, they were unable to slaughter new animals. You can't slaughter an animal on Shabbos or kosher the dishes. Hence, they had nothing else to eat but dairy. Dairy, you can eat the cheeses, you can eat the milk. And that's why we eat dairy, reminiscent of the first Shavuos. Another reason, the dairy and meat meals remind us of the 2-loaf bread offering that was brought in the temple on this day. Sorry, I should write a note here before I forget. Okay. When I get a brainwave, I have to write it down. Sorry. The dairy and meat meals remind us of 2-loaf bread offering that was brought in the temple on this day. Shavuos had two bread sacrifices, 2 bread offerings. Whereas Pesach, we have no chametz. Shavuos is all about the chametz, all about the leavened bread. And there were 2 special bread offerings brought in the temple. Corresponding to those 2 different breads, we have meat and milk, which is like 2 separate dishes. Another reason, it reminds us of the Torah, which is compared to honey and milk. Why is the Torah compared to honey and milk? So one of my favorite reasons is because milk comes from a cow. I was having this conversation with my daughter yesterday. Milk, why is milk dairy? Why is milk not meat? Right? Milk should be meat because it comes from the cow, and the cow is meat. So why is the cow, which is meat, producing milk, which is not meat? We had an interesting discussion about that. So the milk is transformative. It starts off in a state of meat, and it transforms to a state of milk. And the same thing with honey. It starts off in a bee, which is treif, and ends up sweet as honey. So milk and honey is transformative, and Torah will do the same thing to you. When you study Torah, you will experience a metamorphosis. That's why you have milk and honey. That's how the Torah is compared to milk and honey. In ancient times, little children were inaugurated into formal Torah learning on Shavuos. To celebrate this festive occasion, they would serve cakes baked with honey and milk. Although we no longer introduce children to their formal learning on Shavuos, this remnant of the custom remained in place. 3 more reasons before we wrap it up. We must be sure to drink wine during this meal, to facilitate happiness and rejoicing on this festive day. So we add we add wine and milk. However, we must be careful not to allow the joy to get out of hand. Thus, the celebration should be conducted in a refined manner that lends itself to discussions about the gratitude to God and the contemplation of the holiness of the state, to introduce Torah, which is again milk and honey, into the meal. Yom Tov is a holy day, and we should spend at least part of the day immersed in Torah study. Although we will likely be fatigued from the previous night studying all night, we should make special effort to study as much Torah as we can on this auspicious day. And this, my friends, is while we have dairy and Shavuos, my very last piece over here, I'm going to do just one last piece, is the conclusions of this day. Just a few closing thoughts. One of the many names of this Yom Tov is Chag Shavuos, which means the Festival of Weeks. We spoke a lot about that. It's also called Chag Bikurim, the Festival of the First Fruit. The Festival of the First Fruit. Why is it called the Festival of the First Fruit? In ancient Israel, farmers would go out into their orchards at this time of the year, and they would tie a reed around the first fruits to ripen. When they would make their Shavuos pilgrimage to Jerusalem, they would bring along a basket of these first fruits. Once again, the purpose would be to show that all my blessing comes from God. My blessing doesn't come from my real estate, from the fact that I live in Champagne, France, or in some fancy region in Italy. A blessing comes from God, and the first fruits are given to God in gratitude and in recognition of the doctrine of blind trust, which we've spoken about. Thousands would converge in Jerusalem with their baskets from all directions, singing and dancing to musical accompaniment. Shavuos was this extraordinary time of joy, as everybody would come up to Jerusalem with their beautiful baskets with joy and song. They would put gold over the horns of their oxen and baskets, and the whole beautiful celebration. They would arrive en masse and enter the temple to deliver their baskets of fruit to God. They would express their gratitude to God for taking them out of Egypt and for bringing them to a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a mitzvah to bring these first fruits and to make a verbal affirmation about our gratitude to God. Today, we no longer bring Bikurim to Jerusalem, but we focus on our gratitude to God for His bounty on this day, right? Despite the difficulties that we have endured because of coronavirus, we have so much to be grateful for. We live in unprecedented times of prosperity, of security and longevity. Life expectancy is higher than ever. Infant mortality is lower than ever. Our understanding of medical science grows daily by leaps and bounds. Although this disease has taken many lives, with God's help, we will be able to produce vaccines and treatments in the foreseeable future. We've really got a lot to be grateful for. And this year during Shavuos, let us take time to dwell on our blessings, to be grateful to God, to verbalize that gratitude, and thus lift our spirits and enable us to experience the joy of the holiday. I'm going to be writing about this in my email today, this theme of joy and gratitude and happiness, which I think is the antidote and the way with which we'll be able to properly leave this quarantine and go back to normal life. It's going to have to be through joy. So with that, friends, I want to thank you for joining me here today. We're not going to be studying on Friday morning because it's Yom Tov. Today's Thursday, right? Friday morning is Yom Tov, so we're not going to be studying, but we are going to be having services in Shul 9:30 tomorrow morning and Shabbat morning 9:30, but you have to register in advance. The link was in the email. I don't know what that link is, but if you look at yesterday's email, it's called Our Shul is Reopening. You'll see the link over there to join us at Shul. You have to RSVP if you want to come, to make sure that there's a seat for you, because we will not be allowing people to enter once we reach that capacity of 40 people. And that's happening on Friday morning and Shabbat morning. Weekday services will resume here at the Shul on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. and weekday mornings at 7:30 a.m. as we did in the good days. And we'll be carrying on studying on the video right here at 8:30 after the morning service. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday morning on this video. Monday morning, 8:30, with our continued studies. So with that, I'd like to wish you all a good Yantif. Kabbalah Satira, Besimcha V'Pnimius. May we all receive the Torah with joy and with passion. May it be a receiving of the Torah like we've never received before. Inward, meaningful. May our connection with Torah be like we've never had before. And may this be a joyous festival, a festival of marriage, of redemption, of the coming of the Mashiach. Tonight in Jerusalem. Over and out. Good Yantif. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do one thing. I did forget. Today's Torah study is dedicated by Harvey Barnett in honor of the bar mitzvah, his bar mitzvah, the 64th anniversary of his bar mitzvah, but by Stacy and Andrew Thor in loving memory of Stacy's father, whose name is Richard Keller, on the occasion of his yahrzeit today. So let's make a memorial prayer for him right now. In honor of his yahrzeit, and I'm going to do that right now. His name, you said, was, let me check, you said his name, Stacy, was, trying to find that comment that you posted. Let me check, hold on. Here, Reuven Ben Howard. Elmalei rachamim sheikhin meroim imatzei menochanochin al kanfei ashchina b'maloi sagroiv shimot hoirim gzerer kiamazhirim es nishmas Reuven Ben Howard sheolach lelamoi bavur shenod v'tzedaka be'adaz korat nishmos v'gan eden deimenocha seilachin bal rachamim yastrei v'sisik nafav leilamim v'yitzror rachamim es nishmos yadina yunach alasoy. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest on the wings of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, shine as the resplendence of the firmament of the soul of Reuven Ben Howard, also known as Richard Keller, who has gone to his supernal world, for charity has been donated in remembrance of his soul, and Torah study has been studied in remembrance of his soul. May his place of rest be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter him with the cover of his wings forever, and bind his soul in the bond of life. The Lord is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace. And let us say, Amen. Thank you, Stacy and Andrew, for dedicating today's Torah study in loving memory of your father. Thank you, Harvey, for dedicating today's Torah study in loving honor of your bar mitzvah. May we all experience blessing and success, Harvey, gesund and nachas, and blessing in this world. Stacy and Andrew, may your father experience happiness, tranquility, nachas from you right now up in heaven as his soul continues to soar because of you and your mitzvahs. And may we all experience higher consciousness, blessing, and much greater purpose to life during this beautiful festival of Shavuos. L'chaim, over and out. Thank you. Good Yantiv.